My son forged documents and left me in a facility, thinking his mother would vanish so he could steal my home. But I signed my way out, sold the house from under him, and bought the one next door to watch his life fall apart every single morning. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. They called me too slow, too fragile, and too much of a burden. My son, Daniel, signed the papers while I was still standing. He pushed me into the Willow Springs Residential Center like a piece of abandoned luggage, then moved into the Colonial I had spent 50 years paying for. I watched the beige walls close in, the air thick with the scent of institutional bleach and plastic flowers. The loss was immediate and sharp. It hit me not when Daniel hugged me, a tight, meaningless press, but when his wife Chloe kissed my cheek. Her lip gloss was cold, a perfect unfeeling seal on her deception. Then they were gone. The heavy glass doors hissed shut behind them, and the sound felt like the final lock clicking into place. I walked into a room I didn't choose. It held a single dresser, a narrow bed, and a window that faced a courtyard where patients stared into the middle distance. I asked the nurse for a phone to call Daniel. She smiled, a professionally vacant expression. "Visiting hours, dear. You'll have to wait." I told her Daniel had just left. Her confusion was genuine. She hadn't expected me to be lucid. Then she showed me the admission form. The paper was thick, signed by Daniel. It listed my name, Eleanor Vance, beside check marks for long-term placement and observation status. There was a note scrawled in a shaky hand. "Patient suffers frequent confusion spells. Not safe on her own." It wasn't my handwriting. It was a lie, meticulously placed to erase me. The betrayal wasn't the signature. It was the word patient. I sat on the edge of that stiff bed, my hands folded, trying to stop the trembling that ran from my heart straight to my fingertips. The tremors wouldn't stop. That night, the silence of the room was louder than any fight I'd ever had. I thought about the sweat I poured into the Colonial, scrubbing floors until my knees cracked, skipping meals so Daniel could have a suit for graduation. I hadn't asked for thanks, only love. I thought that love would return when I needed it most. After I fainted in the kitchen and Daniel and Chloe rushed over, acting so concerned, so eager to help me settle my affairs. The phrase tasted like ash now. The next morning, I cornered the administrator. I spoke clearly, my voice level, not shaking this time. I explained the mistake. I told her I was fully competent. She only smiled kindly, like I was a clever child arguing over bedtime. "Your son indicated severe confusion, Mrs. Vance. We were told to expect long-term placement." That's when the strategy clicked. Screaming would only prove Daniel right. I had to become the quietest, most cooperative resident they had ever seen. I had to wait. I waited 3 days. On the 4th day, I finally got access to a phone in the communal room. I called Daniel first, straight to voicemail. I called again. No answer. I called Chloe. The phone rang once. Then the dial tone cut dead. Blocked. The realization was a shock, like ice water in the lungs. Chloe, the woman who cried on my kitchen counter about her hard marriage, had blocked me. They hadn't just moved me out. They had tried to delete me entirely. I went to the night nurse. She was young, her eyes tired. "I want to journal," I said, my voice soft. "It helps me organize my thoughts." She brought me a small spiral notebook from the activity closet, the cover a cheerful yellow. I didn't write poetry or prayers. I wrote facts, dates of property transfers, the account numbers Daniel thought I'd forgotten, and the name of the only person who could help me, my lawyer, Attorney Rivera. I remembered how Daniel had only ever seen the cash flow in the joint account. He never saw the separate private savings account I used for my Social Security and Medicare premiums. He never saw the legal documents, stashed in the safety deposit box that only listed my name on the Colonial's deed. He saw an old woman, frail and alone. I saw a battlefield. I called Attorney Rivera's office. It had been years, but I didn't expect her to answer. I left a message, short and hard like a punch. Attorney Rivera, this is Eleanor Vance. I believe my son, Daniel Vance, has committed elder exploitation and fraud. I need you to move an emergency motion. Call me at Willow Springs. The clock felt like it had stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, steady rhythm against the stillness of the room. I didn't think I would survive this place, but I survived a war and a marriage. I was going to survive this too. When I was done, I wouldn't ask for my keys back. I would sell the house and buy the one next door, just to watch the life drain from Daniel's face every time he left the house. Attorney Rivera called me back before lunch the next day. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the canned cheer of the facility's public phone. Mrs. Vance, are you safe? As safe as a woman can be when her only child thinks she's already buried, I told her. The answer felt like setting fire to the notebook in my hands. Tell me everything, she ordered. So I did. The tremble in my hands was gone now. It had been replaced by a cold, surgical calm. We had a battle plan. The staff got nervous when Attorney Rivera arrived. She was not a sweet visitor. She wore a sharp charcoal suit and moved with the deliberate pace of a judge taking the bench. She flashed her credentials, demanding to speak to the administrator, but the manager rushed up instead, trying to spin the narrative, acting in the client's best interest. Attorney Rivera wasn't having it. She came into my room, a leather brief in her hand, the fire in her eyes the first true warmth I'd felt in weeks. You are not staying here another week, she stated, folding her arms. The statement was a verdict, not a question. If they give us trouble, we sue the facility too. We'll charge them with unlawful restraint. We went over the details. The forged power of attorney. The accounts Daniel had frozen. The single, crucial fact he had missed. The deed still listed only Eleanor Vance. The joint account, the one he thought I'd forgotten, was still active, still accessible. I had never closed his access, but he didn't know I still had access too. He didn't know I had moved my emergency reserves out 2 days before the faint, right after the tension started. You want to go nuclear, Eleanor? Attorney Rivera asked, tapping the sheaf of papers. I looked at her, past the beige walls, past the plastic flowers. No, I want to go biblical. She grinned, a flash of white teeth. A revocation first. Mental competency is clear. We strip him of every legal illusion he has. We signed the emergency motion to revoke the forged power of attorney, submitting a capacity evaluation from the facility's own doctor, who privately admitted he saw no signs of dementia. We opened a case against Daniel for elder exploitation and misrepresentation of legal documents. The pen in my hand shook, but this time it was from the sheer surge of adrenaline. This was not just a signature, it was the firing of the first shot. The world had narrowed to a single, sharp target. Daniel thought he was in control, but he had missed the one rule of the house. I always kept the blueprints. I left the Willow Springs Residential Center on a Friday afternoon. No hugs, no goodbyes, just a quiet walk out the front door with a new overnight bag Attorney Rivera bought for me. The air outside tasted like freedom, a cool autumn breeze that whipped my hair around my face. Attorney Rivera rushed me away. We didn't go back to the Colonial. I couldn't bear to see Daniel's truck parked in my driveway. She booked us a private suite at the extended stay, down by the highway. The cheap carpet and thin walls didn't matter. It was my choice. Daniel had no idea I was out, but he would, soon. Attorney Rivera looked at me across the Formica table, pushing a takeout container of pasta toward me. The next step is the hammer, Eleanor. You're still the legal owner of record. We can force a partition sale, kick him out, and every cent comes to you. The hammer fell, sharp and heavy. My heart jumped, then settled. Daniel was living in a home he didn't legally own, operating under a forged document. The law was about to become my witness. I pictured him and Chloe on my velvet couch, drinking wine, bragging about their inheritance. They stole it, and now they were going to choke on it. The process took less than a week. We filed the petition to enforce the partition sale of the property. The moment the legal microcapsule was opened, a 30-day clock started ticking over their heads. If Daniel refused to vacate, law enforcement would remove him. And because the deed still listed only my name, every dime from the sale belonged to me. The paper was served at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. Attorney Rivera's process server reported back. Chloe screamed. Daniel turned ghost white and slammed the door. I didn't need to witness it to feel the satisfaction. Knowing was enough. The wind was finally turning against them. That evening, my phone, a new one Attorney Rivera insisted on, buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I let it ring. Then again. Then again. On the fourth attempt, I finally answered. The line crackled with static. Mom. Daniel's voice was low, almost childlike, utterly devoid of the calculated calm he'd worn in my kitchen weeks ago. We got something in the mail today. Is this real? I didn't respond for a deliberate 3 heartbeats. I let him hang there, twisted in the silence. The sound of his shallow breathing was the most beautiful music I had heard all week. You can't be serious, he finally forced out. You're going to kick me out of my own house? You mean the house you threw me out of? I asked. My voice was steady, a flat line of indifference, the only way to counteract the hot fear that had gripped me in that facility. I felt the hope drain out of him over the wire. The heat was shifting, finally. I never signed the documents, Daniel. You forged my name, froze my accounts, and tried to erase me. The words came out like hammer strikes. He started stuttering excuses. That's not what happened. Chloe, I was left in a room with strangers, Daniel. No warning, no clothes, no phone. I was lied to, manipulated, and legally violated. Don't talk about what happened. Talk about what you did. I cut him off, hard. I don't care what Chloe thought. You're the one I raised. And you let her put me in a box before I was even buried. His voice shook, dissolving into the lost boy I used to console after a bad day at school. You're really going through with this, Mama? Yes, I said. And you have 30 days to get out of my property. I didn't wait for his reply. I hung up. That night, Attorney Rivera and I drank sparkling cider out of paper cups. The victory was not glamorous, but it was mine. A single, hard-won moment of peace. My choice. I slept better than I had in months. The cheap mattress felt like a cloud, and I woke up before dawn, clear-headed and ready. The next morning, we met the buyers, a young couple, just married, looking for their first home. They walked through the Colonial with reverence. The wife, a woman named Maya, ran her hand along the kitchen counter, the one I had worn smooth with years of scrubbing. I think it wants to be filled with love again, she said. I nodded, the words catching in my throat. It does. They loved the arched hallway, the garden, the soul of the place that Daniel and Chloe had tried to smother with their self-serving greed. I accepted their full cash offer by the end of the day. They closed in less than 2 weeks. This was not revenge. This was restitution. Daniel didn't show up for the final inspection or the closing. He folded. But Chloe sent a message to my new phone, slipped through a temporary unblock on social media. The house is just a thing. We're your family. You'll regret this. I stared at the words, the familiar entitlement ringing through the screen. My hands were perfectly steady as I typed back one single, concise sentence. No, I was your past, and you buried me too early. Then I blocked her everywhere. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just waited for moving day. I was saving the best for last. The last time I walked through my old house, it was nearly empty. Dust shadows marked where my furniture used to sit. The only scent was a faint, cloying lavender from one of Chloe's oil diffusers. They were gone. Daniel didn't fight the court-ordered sale. He didn't even contest the market price. The sale went through clean and legal. I shook the young couple's hands at closing, wishing them well. The proceeds, the full amount, were wired into my account. Attorney Rivera met me in the lobby of her office. Ready for step 2, Eleanor? The money's liquid. I smiled. My whole face felt suddenly lighter. I've been waiting for step 2, Monica. We didn't rush. That was the trick I'd learned in that terrible quiet room. Revenge shouldn't come hot and messy. It should come cool, deliberate, patient. We waited for Daniel and Chloe to finish moving their remaining things. We waited for the neighborhood gossip, which had been a low, persistent hum, to die down. Then I did the thing they never saw coming. I bought the house next door. It was a cozy one-story, set back from the street, with a giant rose bush out front, and a back porch that faced directly onto Daniel's kitchen window. Perfect. I paid in full, no mortgage. Just a clean, quick transaction that took Attorney Rivera less than a week to complete. I signed the documents with a pen that shook a little in my hand, not from weakness this time, but from the sheer, overwhelming satisfaction of the coming confrontation. The first day I moved in, I sat on my new front steps. I wore my best Sunday hat, sunglasses shielding my eyes, a cup of sweet tea resting on my knee. I just sat, watching the world and my son pass by. I was a vision of ordinary grandmotherly peace. Then Daniel stepped outside. He was wearing crumpled gym shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, holding a trash bag in one hand. He looked tired, hollowed out, the way a man looks when he realizes the comfort around him was never truly earned. His eyes scanned the street, then froze on me. His chest heaved once. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He didn't speak. He just turned around, shoved the trash bag back through his front door, and went right back inside. The door slammed, a delayed echo of his fear. I didn't move. I had waited too long for this view. My pulse beat steadily. The game had just moved to their turf. 4 days later, Chloe finally emerged. She kept her head down, avoiding eye contact, pulling their living room curtains tighter, parking her car on the opposite side of the driveway. The sheer audacity of my move, setting up permanent residency right next to the house they'd tried to steal, was too much for her pride to process. The house next door was no longer just a house. It was a mirror, reflecting their shame back at them every single time they stepped outside. But I wasn't done. I started planting roses along the fence that separated our properties, bright red ones that bloomed like fire, running along the border I'd just drawn. Attorney Rivera called it peaceful warfare. I called it maintenance. Every morning, I sat on my porch and waved at the mailman. I baked banana bread for the young couple in the Colonial. I chatted with the neighbors Daniel and Chloe had systematically ignored for years. The tension was a low hum in the neighborhood air. Chloe's car started leaving earlier in the morning. Sometimes she didn't come back for days. Daniel stayed inside most of the time. The light in his living room flickered at 2 a.m. I could only imagine the arguments playing out behind his closed curtains. They were trapped. One afternoon, I was watering my new roses when Ethan, my grandson, came walking down the sidewalk. He carried his backpack low. He hesitated at the new rose fence, then crossed my yard and knocked lightly on my door. The knock was tentative, a little bird tapping at the glass. I opened the door slowly. "Grandma," Ethan said, his voice quiet. He looked exhausted, much older than his 14 years. "Can I sit with you for a while?" I didn't ask questions. I just pulled the screen door open and stepped aside. He walked past me, his backpack dropping heavily onto the floor. I poured him a tall glass of iced tea, exactly the way I used to when he was little and afraid of thunderstorms. We sat side by side on the porch swing. The silence was comfortable, unlike the brittle, forced quiet I felt radiating from the house next door. "I heard what they did," he finally said, staring at the condensation dripping down his glass. "I'm sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry for, baby," I told him, giving him a minute to absorb the words. "They told me you had dementia," he admitted, looking up, his eyes searching mine. "Said you weren't safe alone. But you don't look confused to me." I gave him a soft, genuine smile. "I never was, Ethan. They just needed me to be." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, staring intently at the new red roses. "Why did you buy the house next door?" "Because your father needed a reminder," I said. The words tasted like cold metal, one he can see from his front porch every single day. Ethan actually snorted a laugh, a dry, unexpected sound. "You're colder than I thought, Grandma." I laughed back, a real full laugh that felt like shedding a heavy coat. "No, baby. I'm just finished pretending I owe anyone my silence." The laughter drained away, leaving a firm resolve. They called me a burden. I will show them what a boundary feels like. He stayed for dinner that night. I made my famous sweet potatoes, the recipe Daniel had always loved. Ethan ate 2 servings, then confessed, "Mom never learned how to season anything properly. Everything tastes beige." I didn't ask about Daniel and Chloe's marriage. I didn't need to. The silence from the house next door and the lost look in Ethan's eyes spoke for themselves. Some storms speak for themselves. The next morning, Daniel came to my door. I was sipping my tea on the porch, waiting. I didn't flinch. I didn't get up. He stood on the porch, his shoulders slumped, holding his hat in his hands like a nervous schoolboy waiting for the principal. He was ready to lie again, but the lie wouldn't leave his throat. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, the question laced with confusion and anger. I tilted my head, keeping my expression neutral. "Doing what, Daniel?" "Living here, across the street, watching us." "I bought this house because I liked the view," I repeated, the lie sounding so much sweeter than the truth. "You're trying to humiliate me." His voice was rising, finally breaking the brittle quiet. "No, Daniel. That part already happened," I said, setting my teacup down with a light, decisive clink. "You did that when you called me a burden." He looked away, staring at the new rose bush. I continued, my voice low and steady, allowing no room for interruption. "I raised you alone. I carried you through everything. And when I needed help, when I fainted in my own kitchen, you left me in a room with strangers. You called it mercy. You called it love. I thought, you didn't think, Daniel. You took. You erased. You assumed I wouldn't fight back because I was old." I stood up slowly, making sure he had to look up at me. I was the one with the power now. "This is my peace, Daniel. Don't knock unless you plan to earn your way back into it." Then I walked inside and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't tremble. I just sat back down in my favorite chair and watched the red roses bloom through the window. The view had never looked better. Closure, I realized, doesn't come when someone says sorry. It comes when you can sit in silence and know you no longer care what they think, when their presence no longer stirs your blood, when your peace is so loud it drowns out their shame. Daniel stopped speaking to me altogether after that. He became a ghost next door, only visible checking the mailbox or taking out the trash. He never glanced my way, and I didn't invite reconciliation. I needed the truth to sit with him like a shadow he couldn't shake. Chloe, however, escalated. She became passive-aggressively loud. She threw garden parties in their backyard, blasting music during my dinner time. She hosted wine tastings on their porch, cackling just loud enough for the sound to float over the fence and into my living room. I could hear her when she spoke about me to the guests. I mean, she's clearly lonely. Why else would she move next door? She's obsessed with us. It's creepy. She needs to let it go. We're happy. I just smiled to myself. Happy people don't need to shout it from the lawn. They don't need to put on a show for the neighbors. They just are. Then, one Sunday morning, I looked out the window and saw it. A for sale sign, crooked and hastily shoved into their front lawn. Daniel stood beside it, arms crossed, his shoulders tight. Chloe came rushing out minutes later, still in her robe, screaming at him. I couldn't hear the words, but her body language said enough, pointing, yelling, pacing. They were falling apart, and the neighborhood had a front row seat. I watched from my porch, not gloating, but witnessing the storm I'd already survived finally reaching the people who built it. Later that week, Ethan came over again. He had practically moved in, splitting time between school and my quiet house. He said he liked the air here, said he missed real food. The truth was, Daniel barely noticed he was gone. "They're selling," Ethan said, helping me plant new marigolds along the fence. He didn't look up. "I saw the sign," I confirmed, patting the dirt. "Mom wants to go back to Texas," he said. "And your father?" Ethan finally looked up at me, his eyes full of a strange mixture of pity and clarity. "He doesn't want to leave, but he doesn't want to stay here either." He paused, then finished the thought, "Because every time he looks outside, he sees you." I didn't need to say anything. I just patted the dirt down and smiled. My simple act of buying a house had become the constant, living evidence of their failure, a real burden he couldn't hide in a file cabinet. That night, I pulled out the yellow spiral notebook, the one I'd filled with facts, dates, and account numbers in the Willow Springs Center. I wrote one final sentence at the bottom of the last page, under the list of transactions and legal filings. They thought they buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. 2 weeks after the sign went up, it came down. But not because the house sold. Chloe moved out. I watched her drive away, her trunk full of packed boxes, her mouth pressed into a thin white line. There were no hugs, no goodbyes. She didn't even glance at Daniel, who stood motionless on the porch. She just got in her car and drove off, peeling out like she couldn't get away fast enough. The sound of her tires screeching away was the first undeniable sound of financial and social consequence hitting Daniel directly. Daniel sat outside for hours that evening, alone. No loud music, no cackling wine glass, just him and the echo of everything he had destroyed. I thought about going over, saying something, offering him a piece of the mercy he never gave me. But I didn't. His silence was not mine to fix. That night, Ethan knocked on my door. He didn't use a key. He knocked. A gesture of respect. "She left," he said, his voice flat. "Didn't even say goodbye. Just a note on the fridge saying she was reclaiming her future." I let him in, made him hot cocoa, and let him sit on the couch while the little jazz radio played softly. "I don't get it," he admitted eventually, staring at the blank wall. They had everything. They had the house. "No, baby, they took everything, and they built it on lies," I corrected gently. "That doesn't last. It dissolves in the light." He nodded slowly. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Actually stay?" I blinked, realizing the gravity of the request. He wasn't asking for a sleepover. He was asking for refuge. Of course, I said. Anytime. This is your place now, too. He stayed that whole weekend. We cooked together, played card games, and I showed him old photos of his grandfather, telling him stories Daniel never bothered to share. Ethan laughed, a real full-bodied sound that made my heart crack open a little. He still had goodness in him. He still had time to choose a different path. Maybe the story wasn't just about revenge. Maybe it was about reclaiming a legacy, a love that doesn't vanish just because someone called it inconvenient. As I tucked him into the guest room, he turned to me. "You're not a burden, Grandma." I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat. "I know, baby. I know that now." With the porch light glowing and the curtains drawn, I sat by the window watching the house next door. It was quiet, dim, and hollow. This is what justice sounds like. Not rage, not noise, just the hum of peace returning where pain once lived. 3 weeks passed. Daniel's once bustling house started to look like a shell. The curtains stayed drawn even during the day. His car barely moved, gathering pollen as if even the vehicle had given up trying. I'd see him through the window, sitting on the couch in the same wrinkled t-shirt, eyes vacant. He was trapped in the consequence of his actions, a visible microclock of his escalating shame. He couldn't hide from me. Ethan had practically moved in completely. Daniel barely noticed, according to Ethan. "I don't think he cares anymore," he said one night over baked chicken. "He just stares at the TV. Doesn't even change the channel." It's hard to hate the boy you once held against your chest, but it's impossible to pity a man who stole your dignity and buried you alive. Love is complicated like that. Ethan, however, was thriving. He was getting better grades, helping me in the garden, and asking real questions about his family history. That Friday, we went down to the local church pantry together to drop off groceries. I saw a few familiar faces. One of the deacons, a kind woman named Mrs. Lewis, pulled me aside. "We heard what they did, Miss Eleanor. We are so sorry." I smiled. "God restores what people try to ruin, Mrs. Lewis." The whole neighborhood knew by now. The silence of the Colonial was ringing through the community like a funeral bell. That was the social consequence I hadn't planned on, the silent agreement of the community that Daniel was wrong. That weekend, I visited the community center and dropped off a check. It was a substantial $10,000. The amount was anonymous, designated for their new senior outreach program, specifically to expand rideshare services for elders who lived alone. I knew I wasn't the only one who had been made to feel like dead weight. I wanted to make sure no one else would be thrown away as easily as I was. Ethan helped me deliver it. "Why don't you put your name on it?" he asked. "Because the people who need it don't care who gave it," I explained. "They just need to know someone did." He nodded, thoughtful. That Sunday, Daniel came to my porch again. The smell of my sweet potato pie must have drawn him out. He stood there for a long time, his body language speaking volumes of defeat before he finally knocked. I opened the door, wiped my hands on my apron, and waited. "I wanted to talk," he managed. I stepped outside, making sure the screen door remained closed behind me. I wouldn't invite him in. He looked down at the porch floor. "Chloe's not coming back. I tried to fix things, but everything just fell apart." I said nothing. The silence was my best weapon now. Then he looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the boy I used to know, hiding somewhere behind those broken, defeated eyes. The vulnerable Ping was there. "I messed up, Mama. I thought I was doing the right thing. I don't know. I got scared. I didn't want to lose everything trying to take care of you." The lie was still there, polished and smooth, sitting right next to the confession. I didn't want to lose everything trying to take care of you. He wasn't scared of loss. He was scared of work. You didn't take care of me, I said, quiet but sharp, my voice like dry ice. You got rid of me. He nodded slowly, the guilt finally swelling behind his eyes, a painful, visible shift in control. I was wrong. I waited, letting the single word echo in the dead air between us. You thought you could bury me, Daniel, I said. But you forgot what I had left in me. You forgot what I gave up to build that house, to raise you, to keep your lights on. You forgot I'm the one who knows where all the wires are buried. I didn't forget, he whispered, looking down again. I tried to rewrite the ending, and I was wrong. I nodded once, then gave him the only piece of information he truly needed. Ethan is safe with me. He can stay as long as he needs. But you've got some soul searching to do, and you won't do it on this porch. I turned and went back inside, letting the scent of sweet potato pie fill the house. I set the table for two. When Ethan came down the stairs, I explained the confrontation without judgment. Was that him? He asked. I nodded. What did he say? Nothing I haven't already heard in my heart, I said, sliding the pie into a cooling rack. But it's not my job to carry him anymore. The week after, Daniel's car finally moved. He wasn't leaving. He was just driving to work. But the simple act of seeing the car pull away felt like a shift. The tension remained, a thick, persistent pressure, but the active threat was receding. The power was mine, fully reclaimed. I thought the worst was over, that the boundary had been established, and I could finally retire the spiral notebook. I was wrong. 2 months passed in quiet coexistence. Daniel was a shadow, Ethan was a light. Our routine was set. Then I got a call from Attorney Rivera. Eleanor, Daniel's on the move again. He's filed a motion to dispute the validity of the property sale, claiming you were under duress at the time of closing. My heart seized. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about the money. He wanted to tie up the funds, claiming the sale was void, hoping to force a settlement. He was leveraging the very lie he used to lock me up. The audacity was breathtaking. His lawyer is claiming that your presence right next door constitutes psychological coercion and is grounds for invalidating the partition sale agreement. Attorney Rivera explained, sounding furious. He's using your move against you. The fight I thought was over had just escalated to the financial legal rung again, but with a public reputation risk. This wasn't a private family matter anymore. This was a court-documented claim of coercion. The money is safe, right, Monica? I asked, my voice tight. Yes, but he can force us to spend a lot of time and money defending it. He's weaponizing the public record. We have 7 business days to file a counter-motion before the emergency hearing. I didn't hesitate. He wants to play dirty. I'm done being polite. We don't just deny his claim. We expose the whole thing, the forgery, the POA, the facility documents. That's going public, Eleanor. Full legal exposure. Attorney Rivera warned. Daniel brought the cameras, Monica. Now let's give them a show. I went home. Ethan was in the kitchen studying. I looked at the man-child next door, the one I had raised, now trying to take back the financial freedom I had secured. I walked straight to my old chest in the hallway. I pulled out a heavy object wrapped in an old velvet cloth. It was my original, certified will, notarized 3 years prior, clearly excluding Daniel and Chloe, and establishing a trust for Ethan. Daniel had believed I was too confused to update my affairs, but he was wrong. I had been preparing for this inevitable greed long before the faint. Attorney Rivera came to the house the next day. We sat at my kitchen table, the scent of cinnamon still lingering in the air. I unwrapped the velvet cloth and placed the will on the table. He wants to dispute my competency. He wants to claim coercion, I said, sliding the document across the table. He missed one thing. I made this official 3 years ago. Daniel is not included. Ever. Attorney Rivera looked at the date, then back at me. Her expression softened, a hint of admiration creeping in. Eleanor, you are truly biblical. Tell him he has no grounds. Tell him I had already disinherited him before he threw me in the nursing home. Tell him he's fighting his own ghost, I instructed. The counter motion was filed on the 4th day. Daniel's claim collapsed instantly. His lawyer withdrew, citing unforeseen legal complexity. Daniel lost his last active legal leverage, but he gained something worse. The knowledge that the disinheritance was not an act of revenge, but a cold, calculated decision made long ago, based on his character. The victory felt immense, but it was not the final blow. The house next door still stood. Daniel still lived there, a monument to my enduring frustration. I sat on my porch swing that evening, watching him bring in groceries, his face drawn. He had lost the legal battle, but he was still close enough to poison my peace. That's when I saw the mail truck arrive. It pulled up to Daniel's mailbox, and the carrier placed a thick, official-looking envelope inside. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. It was flat and white, with the seal of the City Department of Planning and Zoning in the top corner. Daniel walked out, grabbed the mail, and froze right on his porch when he saw the return address. His shoulders tightened, and his breath hitched. He was in trouble, deep trouble, and it had nothing to do with me. I realized then that Daniel didn't just have a legal ghost to fight. He had a real concrete civic problem that was about to turn his life upside down. Daniel froze on his porch, holding the certified envelope from the City Department of Planning and Zoning. The color drained from his face, a dramatic loss of contrast that even the afternoon sun couldn't hide. I watched him, sitting across the lawn on my peaceful, newly purchased steps. He didn't look at me. He looked at the envelope like it was a live wire. This wasn't my move. This was karmic justice showing up with a clipboard. He ripped the paper open right there. His eyes scanned the terse, bureaucratic language. His jaw locked. He crumpled the document in his fist, then smoothed it out immediately, his frantic, desperate energy a palpable thing across the yard. I had never seen him so purely rattled. The crisis was immediate and visible. Daniel vanished inside the house and returned minutes later, frantically pacing his porch while talking into his phone. He was clearly arguing with some official. His gestures were wide, full of frustrated energy. I could hear the sharp edge of his voice strained with panic. But I just had the survey done. I can't. No, this is my property. The zoning issue, whatever it was a microclock I hadn't set, but one that was ticking furiously for him. Later that evening, the doorbell chimed. It was Daniel, hatless and disheveled, standing on my porch with the crumpled city letter in his hand. "They're saying the Colonial is in violation," he spat out, thrusting the paper at me. His fear was so loud, it drowned out his shame. Something about the pool enclosure or the retaining wall I put up last year. They want $12,500 in fines, and they're demanding immediate structural changes. I kept the screen door locked between us. That sounds like a problem for the homeowner, Daniel. But I'm the homeowner, he shouted, the volume instantly violating the peace I had cultivated. No, Daniel, I corrected him, steadying my teacup. You're the former tenant who tried to steal it. You sold it to the Mayas. You need to call Attorney Rivera and figure out how to pay those fines yourself. The confrontation was clean, short, and the control flip was immediate. He had come for help, but I had leverage. The consequence was already visible. His anxiety was a somatic tell. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting wildly. They'll put a lien on the house. The Mayas will sue me for non-disclosure. I need that money, Mama. I just lost Chloe. I can't lose this too. I saw the lie and the fear tangled up together. The fear of scarcity was a strong motive. I can't help you, Daniel. You cut me out. That's the consequence of your choice. You thought you were so entitled you could just push an old woman aside and claim her life. Now you have to deal with your own. He stood there, stunned, then shifted to a new tactic. What about Ethan? If I lose everything, he'll have nothing. My jaw locked. The move was low, risking the trust I had just rebuilt with my grandson. Ethan is safe with me. His future is secure because I planned for it long ago, before you decided I was a burden. I spoke of Ethan's future trust in vague, firm terms, planting a subtle seed of the disinheritance twist. I unlocked the screen door, but only to place the city document on the porch floor, forcing him to bend down and retrieve it. A small, visible status drop. You need to leave now, Daniel. I have my own life to live. He snatched the paper and stumbled back across the lawn, the zoning fine burning in his hand. The confrontation had cost him dignity and gained him nothing. The next day, the HOA got involved. Mrs. Johnson, the HOA treasurer, showed up on my porch unannounced, looking agitated. She had a thick file of papers tucked under her arm. Eleanor, I hate to involve you, dear, but we're getting letters. Daniel's pool enclosure is 5 inches past the setback line, and he won't return our calls. The stakes were climbing the ladder. Financial, legal, public. I sighed, a deliberate exhale that loosened my shoulders. Mrs. Johnson, Daniel no longer owns that house. The Mayas do. He sold it to them. You need to take this up with Attorney Rivera. My involvement ended the day he sent me away. Sent you away? She whispered, eyes wide. The private story was becoming public knowledge piece by piece. Yes, he forged documents to put me in the Willow Springs Center, claiming I had confusion spells so he could live in the house for free. I delivered the truth plainly, concisely. The admission was a vulnerability ping, risking dignity by exposing my family's shame. The price was a momentary flush of heat on my cheeks. Mrs. Johnson gasped. She stared at Daniel's house, then back at me, the file trembling in her hands. The rumor had just received the official, tearful confirmation it needed. Oh, Eleanor, that's just biblical. She echoed my own private term for the plan. The leitmotif line changed meaning, moving from my secret vengeance to the community's shared judgment. I watched her walk away, realizing that Daniel's desperate attempt to avoid the zoning fine had only amplified the social fallout. He was hemorrhaging reputation. Ethan, sitting across from me at the kitchen table doing homework, saw Mrs. Johnson leave. He looked at me, understanding the cost of my conversation. Grandma, why did you tell her he put you away? Because the truth is leverage, Ethan, I said, putting my hand over his. It forces people to choose a side, and I need the right side to win. My goal was clear: boundaries and restitution. That evening, I was in the garden when Daniel stormed over. He vaulted my rose fence, reckless and frantic. What did you tell Mrs. Johnson? The truth, I said, not looking up, pulling a weed from the fertile soil. He seized the hose I was holding, turning it off. The sudden silence was sharp, a sensory jolt. The city is threatening to find me. The Mayas are calling me. I'm going to lose everything, and you think this is funny. It's not funny, Daniel. It's consequence, I said, standing up to face him. You thought I was a burden. You wanted me erased. Now you get to live next to the ghost you tried to bury. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, shoving it into my hand. Fine. You deal with it. Call this number. It's the city inspector. Tell him I'm an honest man. The move was desperate, a final reckless surrender of responsibility. I took the phone. It was hot from his panicked grip. The small sacrifice was taking on his problem, even for a minute. "What's the cost of this call, Daniel?" Just fix it," he pleaded, turning away and walking back toward his silent, dark house. I stared at the phone. The number was blinking. The micro clock was counting down to the close of the city office. I pressed call. I stand there, the phone hot in my hand, listening to the angry, desperate voice of the city inspector over the phone Daniel just left behind. The inspector's voice on the line was thick with official impatience. He didn't want explanations. He wanted compliance. I put my finger to my lips, signaling silence to Ethan, who was watching from the window. "Sir, this is Eleanor Vance," I said, using my calmest, most grandmotherly voice. "My son, Daniel Vance, asked me to call you regarding the notice about the retaining wall. I understand this is frustrating, but I assure you, the former owner is dealing with a lot of personal turmoil right now." The call was a risky ask, risking my credibility by associating myself with Daniel's problems. "Mrs. Vance, we sent a certified letter over a month ago. The fines are accumulating." He ignored us. The inspector's tone was accusatory. "He didn't ignore you," I countered, pivoting the leverage. "He missed the letter because he was dealing with the consequences of elder exploitation." The mention of the official crime was the power flip. The house was illegally occupied, and the previous owners were victims of a complex legal fraud. The new owners, the Mayas, have a partition sale agreement we must honor. Any lien on the property right now would be tied up in litigation for months. That's what Attorney Rivera is going to tell you. I heard the man exhale sharply. I had used Daniel's crime as my shield, converting a bureaucratic fact into a dramatic consequence. The threat had shifted from Daniel's fine to the city's legal headache. "Let me give you my lawyer's number," I offered, instantly handing off the liability. "She can provide the case number and the court date. If you want those fines paid, sir, you want to put the pressure on Daniel Vance, not the new owners, and certainly not the victim of his fraud." I hung up, a tiny smile playing on my lips. I deleted the call history from Daniel's phone, then walked over and placed it gently on his porch railing. I didn't wait. The next day, Daniel was silent, but the consequence was visible. 2 men in city department trucks showed up at his house. They walked the perimeter, snapping photos of the wall. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching them like a prisoner. The public shame was now undeniable. The social fallout spread quickly. The neighbors, emboldened by Mrs. Johnson's gossip, stopped waving at Daniel. They'd smile and wave at me instead, bringing me fresh baked cookies or chatting over the rose fence. Daniel's reputation was crashing while mine was being restored. The biggest shift came from Ethan. He stopped going back to Daniel's house entirely. He came home from school, dropped his bag in the guest room, which was now his room, and helped me in the garden. He was making a choice with a price. Loyalty to me cost him proximity to his father. One afternoon, I was at the community center for a meeting about the $10,000 grant I funded. I was surrounded by friends and neighbors when Daniel walked in. He looked completely defeated. He spotted me, smiled weakly, and started to walk over. "Eleanor," he began, trying to project a semblance of familiarity. "I just wanted to apologize for the HOA situation. I'm working with the city, and it's all going to be fine." He was lying, trying to save face publicly. I didn't let him get close. I moved away, greeting Mrs. Lewis, the deacon who had shown me such kindness. "Mrs. Lewis, thank you again for your prayers. My grandson, Ethan, has really settled in. We're doing well, thanks to the support of the community." Daniel was trapped. He couldn't contradict me without escalating the public spectacle. He watched as Mrs. Lewis hugged me, her eyes full of pity for him. The emotional heat had turned into a social burn. He stayed until the end of the meeting. When everyone dispersed, he approached me again. This time, he was quieter, more desperate. "Mom, please, I need to talk to you about Ethan's schooling. I'm worried about him." He was using Ethan as a final, desperate pressure point. "You should have been worried about him when you lied about my health and tried to steal his future inheritance," I said, my voice hardening. "Ethan is fine. His grades are up. He's safe. You, however, are now facing the city, the Mayas, and the HOA. That's a lot of plates to spin for a man who claimed his own mother was a burden." The conversation was a clean, decisive confrontation. He looked around at the empty community hall, the shame now visible, physical. "I need your forgiveness, Mama," he whispered, a desperate, exposed sound. "I forgave you, Daniel," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I forgave you when I decided not to let your choices define the end of my life. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means setting a boundary." I walked toward the door. He followed, reaching out, then stopping himself before he touched me. I had to pay off the vulnerability ping from the previous part. The risk of sharing my story with Mrs. Johnson now led to public vindication and Daniel's final, devastating social defeat. He tried one last time. "If you won't forgive me, how can I ever move forward? That's your burden to carry, not mine," I said. I left the community center, the sounds of his despair echoing behind me. My heart was steady. I had paid the price for my peace in full. I closed the door, knowing that my peace was built on a wall he could not climb. The wall I had built around my heart was fortified with roses and legal documents. Daniel still lived next door, but he was a ghost in the machine. His life was shrinking. Chloe's absence was now a permanent vacuum, leaving behind unpaid bills and a lingering scent of resentment. Ethan confirmed it. Dad got a letter from the bank. It had Chloe's name on it, but he just slammed it on the counter and didn't open it. Daniel was dealing with the financial wreckage of his marriage and his failed theft attempt simultaneously. Every day was a consequence beat. One morning, Attorney Rivera arrived unannounced, carrying a thick, sealed envelope. "Daniel called me," she announced, sitting at my kitchen table. "He's still trying to figure out the estate. He asked for a copy of your will, just to be informed." I smiled, a slow, patient, predator's smile. This was the final hard-lock confrontation, the one he had initiated. "And what did you tell him, Monica?" "I told him that I was legally unable to share the contents of your finalized estate plan with him, as he is not currently a beneficiary. And I suggested he review the documents we filed regarding his competency claim, documents that clearly established your intentions years before he committed you." The news was meant to land like a bomb, not a whisper. I knew Daniel would call. My pulse spiked, a rush of adrenaline. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. I made a cup of jasmine tea, placing the receiver next to the saucer. It rang precisely at 7:30 p.m. "Mom!" Daniel's voice was strained, tight, stripped of all artifice. The heat was immense. "Is this true? You're cutting me out completely?" "You did that all by yourself, Daniel," I said, quiet and declarative. "Years ago, when you signed me away like luggage and sold my things before I was even cold. The disinheritance wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of recognition." Silence. The sound of his shallow breathing was the only thing connecting us. "You erased me," I continued, pressing the advantage. "And now you're learning what that feels like. I told you I forgave you, but forgiveness doesn't mean inheritance. My legacy goes to the people who valued my life." "You want me to beg?" I want you to leave, I replied simply, and I want you to find a way to live with what you did. He couldn't stand the truth. The power had irrevocably flipped. He tried to leverage the one thing I still loved. What about Ethan? Daniel asked, his voice shaking with a cold, calculated threat. He's my son. What happens to him if you're gone? The confrontation was a direct, devastating challenge, forcing a choice. I took care of Ethan's future 3 years ago, I said, my voice ice cold. Before you proved what kind of man you were. Attorney Rivera has the final notarized will. The house you're standing next to, the one I paid for in cash, it goes to a trust for Ethan when he turns 21. The rest of my estate, the money you tried to steal, it goes to the Mayfield Legacy Grant. It helps other women who were discarded like me. The victory was sharp, hard-earned. I had countered his threat with a clear consequence and a secret he thought was impossible. He hadn't just been disinherited. His son was protected by the money Daniel had tried to claim. He hung up. No goodbye. No rage. Just a sudden final silence. That was the last time we ever spoke. A month later, he moved quietly. No U-Haul, no loud confrontation, just a faded for sale sign that finally came down after 2 weeks. The neighbors said he left town, vanished like a bad habit. The shame had become too heavy to carry alone. The final price for his greed was his entire life structure and the loss of his son. I sat on my porch with a cup of jasmine tea, looked out at the quiet street, and felt nothing but profound peace. Ethan came outside with 2 muffins and sat beside me. He's gone, he said. I nodded. Sometimes people leave when they realize they can't control the narrative anymore. He looked at me, a worried frown creasing his brow. Do you think he'll ever try to come back? I looked out at the garden, roses blooming, tomatoes starting to sprout. Maybe, I said. But if he does, he'll find a fence that wasn't there before. A very tall, very bright red fence. He smiled finally. He asked the question I knew was the real threat. What happens to Ethan if you're gone? Daniel's absence settled over the neighborhood like a blanket of fresh snow. The house next door was quiet, dim, and hollow. I had achieved distance with meaning. Ethan had completely settled into a rhythm at my house. He called it our place now. He joined the youth gardening club and asked if we could grow tomatoes next season. Of course we could. We could grow whatever we wanted, because no one was going to uproot us again. Our life was simple, built on trust and quiet consistency. I was raising my grandson a second time, not out of duty, but out of choice. Later that year, I was invited to speak at the community center's Elder Justice Seminar. They asked me to say a few words about financial abuse and reclaiming your legal rights. I agreed. It was the final public step in my journey, the ultimate climb on the escalation ladder. I stood in front of that crowd, mostly women over 60, and told them the truth plainly. They will call you old, I said, my voice clear and strong. They will call you a burden. They will smile while stealing the life you built. But let me tell you something. There is power in the truth. There is power in silence. And there is power in the law if you are brave enough to use it. I didn't mention Daniel by name, but everyone knew. I told them about the importance of securing your affairs early, of establishing boundaries, and of using your financial freedom to build a legacy, not just an inheritance. I spoke of the Mayfield Legacy Grant, the $50,000 I had already donated to help women like me pull themselves back into dignity. A few women cried. One came up to me afterward, hugged me hard and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not crazy." That was the true victory. Not just revenge, but legacy. making sure our stories weren't erased just because we couldn't carry our groceries anymore. I went home that night. The little house I had once thought was a step down from my past was not smaller. It was freer. It was lighter. As Ethan set the table and asked if we could bake cookies later, I realized I wasn't at the end of anything. I was finally at the beginning. Daniel had sent me to a nursing home and called me a burden, but I had given him a burden he would never shake. The knowledge that the best parts of his future, his son and his legacy, were now secured by the mother he tried to bury. I sat on my porch swing. The red roses along the fence were blooming, bright and relentless. The house next door was silent and dark, waiting for a life it would never receive from him. My peace was loud now, drowning out the echo of his shame. I had traded a life of worry for a life of quiet power, and the view had never looked better. The porch light glows, the roses are high, and the house next door is finally quiet and dark. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here,